Celebrity voice impersonation not an endorsement.
Why go to a single furniture store when you can go to Big Sandy Superstore? Shop and compare America's top 5 mattress brands, plus Nectar and Purple. And choose from over 22,000 in-stock appliances from the top brands at the guaranteed lowest price. Or furnish the room of your dreams with a large selection of American-built furniture. With financing plans for just about anyone, there's nowhere else quite like it. Big Sandy Superstore.
Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AEye Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AEye Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AEye Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to AEye Scouted on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Dave Hendrick, joined as always by Mr. Karl Matchett. How are you, sir?
Raring to go for the new year.
Karl Matchett, the Reds are top of the league. What do you make of that after 19 games?
Unexpected would be the first word I would use to describe it. Very much appreciated would be my second assessment. And third, I would think that on the balance of everything that's happened, deserved, which is also unexpected, but I think is actually correct, even if you just, ignore the fact that, literally we deserve it because we've got more points. I think we've actually been more consistent than anybody else that I've watched at all this season. So although I don't think that we're at the level we're capable of and we all expect a bit more improvement, we've been better than everybody else, actually.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the top 5, because I think there's 5 teams that can make Champions League this year. We've dropped points in 7 games, Arsenal in 7 games, Villa in 7 games, City in 7 games, and Spurs in 8 games. The difference is we've only lost once. And even that defeat came with a massive asterisk on it because of the situation with the VAR. So we have been the most consistent in that we've only lost once and it wasn't a real loss, even though, well, it was a real loss, but you know what I mean. The 6 draws does concern me a little bit though, Karl, because we have lost titles in the past because we've drawn too many games. And when I look at the draws, I mean, at the time, obviously, Chelsea away, we didn't play well, you take the draw. But in hindsight, it looks like 2 points dropped because they've been so bad. I would say the same of Brighton. They've been quite poor this season. So in hindsight, it looks like 2 points dropped. But like with the Chelsea one, I was happy enough with the draw at the time. The Luton one is obviously a bad result. That is 2 points drop, no matter what way you look at it. The draw away to City is a fine result. Absolutely fine. No issues there. United is another one that feels like a massive, massive loss, where we've dropped 2 points against a bad team. And then obviously Arsenal. And I think a draw was a result we would have taken pre-game. But given what took place in the game, given the Stonewall penalty we were denied, and given we missed a ridiculously strong chance to make it 2-1 when Trent hit the crossbar, it felt like 2 points dropped. So if you take Arsenal, United, and Luton, if we'd won those games, that's 6 points more. If we'd gotten correct refereeing against Spurs, that's maybe 7 points more. And we would look very, very comfortable. And even though we haven't played anywhere close to what I think we're capable of on a consistent basis, we would actually be looking at a 49-point tally from 19 games, which is really, really strong. So there's just a couple of little moments that have separated us from being way out in front in a really strong position to we're top, but there's a lot of challenges to come. But I think you're right. I think we have been the most consistent. I think we do deserve to be here. And as I look back over our shoulder at the table, it's the team in fourth that caused me the most concern, because they're 5 points behind us. They've got a game in hand, and they haven't played this season. They've just kind of drifted through the first 18 games of their campaign.
Yeah.
And if I was Arsenal, I'd be very concerned at the fact that City have not yet started to play. They're getting KDB back soon, and if they win their game in hand, they go above you. I think that's a really bad marker for Arsenal, considering I think they believe they're better than City, and yet the table will probably show quite shortly that they're not.
My impression of those two teams in particular, and I'm not going to talk about Aston Villa in title terms, I refused to do so a couple of weeks, and they've dropped 5 points out of 6 since then over Christmas, just as, we basically said, once you start playing the games more regularly and you're playing the same teams and you do drop off with 1 or 2 star players, you very, very quickly find out the difference between a good half a campaign and a season where you challenge for things, whether it's top 4 or title. So let's just leave them aside for now. Man City, my impression of them is that they've been in third gear a lot of the time and second gear some of the time. Arsenal, I have found to be in second gear the vast majority of the time, and in first gear for a lot of matches, or at least a lot of spells in matches where they're playing really well at times, but they need to get those points. And if they are, let's say now, just facing a bit of a drop-off, where they've only now won 1 of the last 4 Premier League games, so maybe this is, one of their, let's say, 2 spells across the campaign where they might drop a few points in consecutive matches, they're only now hitting that patch, and Man City are only the game in hand that they have on them behind them.
Yeah,
I think that's quite an indictment of there is still a gap. I do think a lot of that is squad depth, because, I've said before, I think Arsenal's 11, 12, 13, maybe even 14 is pretty much of the same standard, but beyond that, it's not. Whereas Man City can probably go to 16 or so and still have it very much of the same level. And that is something that's to be expected because Arsenal are not there. And it's also to be expected because the mentality that you gain, the self-belief that you gain from actually going on and winning something, the title or a Champions League, that does only come to players after they've done it. And they haven't for Arsenal, and they have for Man City. So again, there is that mentality gap there still, which across the course of an entire year will count for quite a bit. I think Liverpool have just been more consistent on their level, though. I'm not talking here about scintillating performances, but just mean the level of overall match showing, let's say. So incorporating everything, the tactical plan and how close you get to that, your technical level and how close you get to that, and how often you do all of the things combined defensively and attacking in every single game. Liverpool have been the most consistent at that. And that is, I think, the only reason that we're the only team to have lost once, because the others haven't. City have had quite a few really ragged games. I don't really think we've had more than 2 or 3 ragged games, even if we haven't played well football-wise.
Yeah, I fully agree. I also think you look at both ends of the pitch. When you look at title contenders, you've got to look at both ends of the pitch. We have the best goalkeeper in the world, and we have Mohamed Salah. Now, we have question marks in our other 2 attacking spots, but getting Diogo Jota back, a proven Premier League goal scorer, is a big, big boost for us. And we still have the possibility of Darwin going on a hot streak, Gakpo and Diaz recovering their form. You look at City, well, they have Haaland to come back into their team, who's a freak. They have KDB to come back into their team. As a creator, he's a freak of nature. And they've got Ederson, who's, I don't believe, a world-class goalkeeper. I think he's overrated, but he is a very good goalkeeper. You look at Arsenal, their starting front 3 have scored 10 goals between them in the league this season, Karl. 10. Saka, Jesus, Martinelli. They're 3 very, very good football players. But they've only scored 10 goals between them. And at the other end of the pitch, would you really put your faith in either of those goalkeepers? I don't think they have the pieces in place to win a title. And then you talked about mentality. It also goes to the manager. I think Arteta's he's too emotional. I think he lets perceived slights and perceived wrongs get into his own head in the wrong way. And I think that can translate into his team. I think it did last season. And the thing with this Arsenal team, like you said, as City last season, winning the league, winning the Champions League, that know-how of how to do that is huge. Well, what do these Arsenal players have? Well, last season, they were 8 points clear with 9 games to go. And they ended up losing the league by 6 points. They took only 15 points from a possible 30 in their last 10 games. The season before, they were nailed on for top 4 and managed to fall over the line and finish 5th. So Arsenal don't know how to finish a season strong. City do. We do, as we have done in 3 of the 5 seasons prior to this one. That's why I think, regardless of what Arsenal have done, I think ourselves and City just are better set up to go and win a league title. I think Arsenal have issues in a lot of areas. Like you said, like they're playing about as well as they're capable of playing in a lot of these games. And yet they're really struggling. Like you look at the Brighton game, just as an example, they go 1-0 up. They dominate the game. They can't find a second goal. And yet Brighton miss a big chance, which could easily have made it 1-1. And then they get the second because Brighton are forcing the issue and committing too many bodies forward. But that could easily have ended in a 1-1 draw. You look at some of their other games, the Wolves game as an example, another one where they dominated the game but struggled to score. Brentford, they dominated the game. Could have been 2-0 down despite dominating the game. They came on to win the game in the end themselves, but they have a number of performances like that. They're not good enough in attack. Their build-up play through midfield is far too reliant on Odegaard, and he's having to drop quite deep to get himself involved in their first phase build-up, which is taking him out of being involved in later build-up. And then the goalkeeper, I think their defence, obviously 18 goals conceded is pretty good, but it's worse than they had last season. And the goalkeeper just always looks like he's on the brink of a howler. I just don't see it with them. I don't see them as a team that can win the league this year.
How's your money feeling? It's about to feel happier with a certificate from Happy Money's partner, Michigan State University Federal Credit Union. Elevate and increase your savings with 18-month terms and only a $500 minimum. And the happiest part? MSU FCU certificates yield 4.5% APY annual percentage yield. Now that's a happier side of money. Elevate your savings. Go to happymoney.com/MSUFCU. That's MSUFCU. Funds insured up to $250,000 by NCUA. The APY is accurate as of the 12/1/2023 dividend declaration date. Early withdrawal penalties do apply. Fees may reduce earnings on the account. Any monthly withdrawals or transfers reduce earnings.
Are you that person who has everything? The coolest merch and those must-have fan threads? Well, over at our Anfield Index shop, we've gone that extra mile when it comes to pimping up your Liverpool collection. From our popular range of bespoke design t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies and hats, to our signature edition mugs, prints and coasters, all provided with fast worldwide shipping. We have something for every red. We also stock official LFC merchandise and are licensed with the Premier League and UEFA to sell official iron-on shirt badges and sleeve patches. As a listener to this podcast, you can get 10% off everything with coupon code AIPRO10. Just head over to AnfieldIndex.shop or find us on Etsy by searching for Anfield Index.
No, I agree. I mean, we've said from the start of the campaign that it's City's to lose, and they're comfortably the best side. And even at the start of the campaign, when we thought there was quite a lot of work for us to do, we'd be surprised if anybody finished above us, other than these two teams, Arsenal and Man City. But even I'd say as early as September, maybe into October, I think we were, at least between us, quite comfortable that we would finish second at worst this season. And I think that that's only continued to show that that's the case. And maybe, maybe Arsenal signed someone in January, or they just improved tactically. But I do think that there are too many defensive concerns to really see them as a credible threat. And especially with the goalkeeper, I think that that's just job number one that you have to improve. Even if your forwards are not capable of scoring 15 apiece or whatever, I think you can make up with that if the whole team is rounded out really well. But nobody else can cover for a goalkeeper being below elite. And that is very, 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 very regularly what you need to win a title.
Yeah. I mean, the only non-elite goalkeeper to win the Premier League title, I think, is Kasper Schmeichel. I think if you look back, Peter Schmeichel, great. Tim Flowers, very good. Peter Schmeichel, great. Seaman, great. Mark Bosnich was good, not great, but he was good and he was capable of being great. Jens Lehmann, obviously a great goalkeeper. Petr Cech, an old-timer. Van der Sar was incredible. Like, you just don't find teams with average goalkeepers winning the league, other than that Leicester season. But I think he was more consistent and more reliable than David Raya. It was also a fluke season where the league was just trash. And they managed to win the title with a points tally that you'd be lucky to get third with now. So I don't think you can win the league with a goalkeeper that bad. I think that defence can be got at. Last night, I mean, Jared Bowen just took the game to Saliba and made him look very, very average. I think our mistake against Arsenal was not playing Darwin as the 9 and really having a go at Saliba and having a go at Ben White, both of whom I think can be got at. I think you can get at the other side, obviously, a lot easier because Zinchenko defensively is not that strong. And Gabriel, while I think he's good, he can be quite rash. They can make an internal improvement if Thomas Partey gets fit again, because he's an upgrade on Rice as a 6, and then Rice goes back into playing as an 8. And I think a Partey, Rice, Odegaard midfield 3 is really, really strong, both on and off the ball. I think that's a very, very good midfield. If they get Tomiyasu back, he can improve the defence for them. But you're still going to have a bad goalkeeper. And ultimately, I just don't think you can win the league with a bad goalkeeper. Not if City kick into gear. Like, City have not yet put their strong run of games together, which we know at some point they will. They'll rattle off, 15 wins out of 17 with a draw in there as well, because that's just what they do. And they haven't done anything like that yet this year, and yet they'll be above Arsenal if they win their game in hand. And that I think just speaks to the gulf between the two. And it's just, all we can do is do what we do and get the best results we can get and keep playing our football. And, we've got players to come back as well. Andy Robertson is to come back at some point. Thiago to come back at some point. Alexis to come back quite soon, apparently could be ready for Newcastle. So we have internal improvements we can make as well. But given where we are, Karl, surely the club have to be looking at January and thinking, right, there is an opportunity here. There is an opportunity here. We've got a lead on City, and maybe, just maybe, we can do enough to stave them off. Maybe KDB comes back and he gets hurt again. Maybe Haaland is out another month and we can open up a bit of a bigger gap. So with that said, what would you be looking for Liverpool to do in January, because I think there's 3 positions we need to be looking at to upgrade. Obviously, the left back, left centre back hybrid kind of role, the holding midfield role, and left wing. They're the 3 I think we need to be looking at upgrading. If it was you, what would you look at in January?
I think my preference would be the holding midfield role. And there are sort of three reasons for that, really. One, I would only do it for any of them if we already knew who we wanted, first of all, regardless of which position we go for. So let's assume they've already made their decisions, and whether that's Kamara or Palhinha or someone totally different, they know who they want. If that person's available, then they can go get them. So that would be my preference. First of all, is because we don't have that specialist, or I should say we don't have that top level specialist. So if there's already someone to come in and play, for want of a better term, let's say a destroying version of the number 6, because that's certainly what we don't have. Alexis, maybe as a part protector, but mostly playmaker. And then you've got Endo, who is, let's say, more of a shuttler and more of a, I suppose, a little bit more towards the destroyer in terms of winning the ball back quite regularly, but certainly not a top-class screener. So if that's available, firstly, that fits in as we are at the minute. Secondly, it fits in perfectly with how we think we would use Trent if we move more regularly to him in midfield as a starter. And thirdly, aside from obviously Endo is not going to be there because he's off to Asian internationals in January, the move would also allow a bit more flexibility around the number 8s. Because if Alexis is moving forward, there are going to be games when we're short in the final third, and either Elliott or Szoboszlai are then able to play across January, February, and obviously beyond that, in that front 3 line from one side or the other. And obviously Salah's going to be away. Diaz, we know, has been very, very hit and miss this season form-wise. Jota's injury record, I don't think is very reliable, certainly at this point. So I think that while I do want a forward to come in, because I think we are of a lower overall level at the minute than we need to be, I think it's more beneficial that a holding midfielder comes in to both ends of the pitch, basically.
Yeah, see, I do fully agree. The issue is, I don't think they're going to go for Palhinha. And I think it's probably his age that's the biggest factor. Like, if you look at what Endo has done in recent weeks and how effective he's been, and I think he's had by far the best sort of 3-game run of his Liverpool career. I thought he was really good against Sheffield United. Thought he was very, very good against Arsenal. I thought he actually outplayed Rice in that midfield battle. And he was good against Burnley. But like, he's not doing anything spectacular. He's just going out and winning the ball, getting involved in challenges, protecting the defence. And then he is quite good with his progressive stuff. Like, he's comfortable to carry the ball into space. He's forward thinking with his passes. But I look at Palhinha and I think, well, he could be a supersized version of that. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's faster, and he's just a better player. So I do think he'd make sense, but I just don't think we'll do it. I have a feeling we might be looking at someone like Kamara for the summer. I think if Czech Doucouré hadn't torn his Achilles, I think we might have revisited that one from the summer. But I think he's now going to be off the mark for us entirely. I don't think we buy someone coming off an Achilles tear. Not after the Benteke fiasco, where we didn't realise he'd lost his pace, despite the fact that we had an entire year of evidence post-Achilles tear that he'd lost his pace. I think it will be someone like Kamara, or maybe even a Guimaraes, even though I don't really see him as a 6. I think they might look at him and think, well, that's kind of what we want, a bigger, stronger version of Alexis in there. But neither of them are going to be available in January. They're summer buys, especially considering both are rumoured to have buyout clauses for next summer, and you know how much we love a buyout clause. So if we're not going to do that, I have a feeling what we might just do is try and patch the midfield together for the rest of the season. I hope that Thiago comes back and of the 19 games, maybe he plays 10 of them. We'll hopefully get Besetic back at some point. Maybe he plays 5. Endo will come back from the Asian Cup. Curtis hopefully will stay fit. Alexis is back, and Dominic and Harvey are there as well. And obviously Ryan Gravenberch. So I think they might look at it and go, you know what, numbers-wise, we'll just cobble it together for the rest of the season. So I think if they are to do something, I think more likely is a defender. I think we actually could do with 2, because I think I'd like another centre-back. I know Kwanzaa's been outstanding. I'm including him in the centre-back group. But I feel like Joe Gomez is better as a full-back than a centre-back these days. So I would like another centre-back. But I don't think we'll do that in January. I'd like that left-sided one in January. But they have to make a decision on what type of left-back they want. Like, Costas is obviously a good player. I just don't feel like he's good enough long-term. He's certainly never going to be first choice for Liverpool. And Andy Robertson is declining. So do you go with a Robertson mould of left back? You know, someone like an Aït-Nouri and a Stupinan, an Anthony Robinson. I'm not a big fan of his. I think he makes too many mistakes. I think he's got some limitations on the ball. But do you do that, or do you go for more of the kind of left back, left centre back type? I think AEye, an Inacio, a Tiete, potentially someone like Bastoni, given Inter's financial situation. Could you try and take advantage of that and go with a bid for him and see what they say? Now, I think Hincapié is the one that actually fits the best because he has more experience as a left back and even as a left wing back. And if you were in a pinch, he could sit into midfield for you and do a job there. But he's not going to be available in January. And if he is the one that they've targeted, that might mean that waits till summer as well. But Inacio has a buyout clause and is available. And we apparently have looked at him quite strongly in the past. So I feel like if we're going to do something, he might be the one that we actually just pull the trigger on and say, look, just get him. He can play left back in a 4. He's comfortable on the ball. He's a really, really good passer. He can play centre back if you need. He's a bit small for what we like as a centre back, but he can do that. But he fits into a back 3 perfectly. So while I would prefer the holding midfielder, I think more likely is a defender. And I mentioned left wing. That is entirely reliant on Trent staying at right back, moving into midfield, rather than being a midfielder. Because I think if Trent is a midfielder, we're either changing to a midfield 4 or Dominic is moving into the front 3 and Trent is playing right side of the midfield 3. And in which case, Gomez obviously becomes the right back, but then I would want us to go and get a right back in the summer to compete with Joe or be the starter.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an overhaul like we needed last year, but obviously the tactics have changed, so certain additions and switches are required. And I think what you said about deciding what kind of left back we want is correct, but also what kind of right back we want is the knock-on effect of that, isn't it? Whether we want one who is going to play every single week as a defensive or holding or overlapping, or one who can come inside to that midfield zone even if Trent is there. Whatever way round they envisage it being the most regular occurrence, we need the player in place for that, because at the minute it is mix and match, and sometimes it's fine, but a lot of times it isn't. I do think that there's a couple of quite big decisions to be made now.
Yeah, I mean, the right back that I sort of settled on in my own head is Arnau Martinez of Girona, who I just think has enormous potential and is already very, very good. Every time I see him play, I come away impressed. And I think he's very comfortable on the ball. He's not an overlapping machine, but he's comfortable enough to get forward. And he's kind of like Joe in that regard, but more maybe a bit more measured in his passing than Joe. But I think defensively, his potential is sky high. Like, he could be an Ivanovic type of right back if you really wanted him to be. He has the size. He needs to fill out a little bit, but he has this, he's 6 foot, 6'1". He's good in the air. He's strong in the challenge. And he's very, very composed. And he reads the game really well. So if we did want to move Trent into midfield, I think I'd look at him, which in turn means an attacking left back. And there's more of them than there is, say, attacking right backs. Because when you look at the attacking right back market, Jeremy Frimpong is the obvious one. But for me, he's not a fullback. He's a wing back. I think he's too small to play as a right back in the Premier League for a team that wants to win the title. He's 5'7", 5'8". He's quite thin. He's a machine going forward. He's brilliant going forward. But I do think defensively, he would be a liability. Now, look, as things stand, Ibu is already covering enormous amounts of ground, so I don't think Ibu would be too put out. But I do think someone like Martinez would make more sense. And then on the left side, you go for an Aït-Nouri, a Kirkez. If you could find the money for Estupinan, would be great. But that's kind of where I'd land on it. Now, if you went for someone like Inacio, a defensive left back, and you were going for an attacking right back, then it's a different conversation to have. And then someone like Frimpong, because you're going to shift into a back three anyway, I think Frimpong then freed to go and bomb down the right could be interesting.
Do you expect us to sign anyone in January?
I do. And I think it's more foolishness than anything else. But I think back to last year. Through December, we were being told Liverpool have no plans to add in January. And then Cody Gakpo happened. And the year before, Liverpool had no plans to add anybody. They definitely weren't adding anybody. James Pearce was mocking people, suggesting we should add. We're going for all four trophies. We don't need anything. Look how strong we are. And then Diaz happened out of nowhere. So I kind of feel like Liverpool look for opportunities in January for players that they have interest in, and they use misdirection, and then they go out and they get the player as quick as they can to avoid any kind of bidding war. I think Liverpool actually operate a little bit better in January than they do in the summer, because they can deals get done quicker in January anyway, because selling clubs have less time to replace players, so they don't drag things out as much. They tend to just take a bid and either accept it or decline it and say, look, we're not interested. Whereas in the summer, you get deals strung along for weeks and weeks and weeks. I think in January, things happen quicker. And I think we will do something. I could be wrong, but I think we will do something.
Yeah, I mean, that would be fair enough, I think, if we were to add an option, let's call them, whether it's first team or not, given that at the minute, I think we're stuck on, I think it's just 10 players who have played 800 league minutes or more this season. When you consider Salah is at the top of our tree for league minutes on 1,600. So you would expect, obviously, most of the first team to be, 1,000 and above. We're only on, I think it's actually only 9 of them have played 800 minutes or more, just looking at it now, because Konate's not quite there yet. So it's not a deep one that we've got. It's okay at the minute, but I think if you start spreading out any more than we are at the minute, and obviously in January that is going to be the case, because Salah, we've just mentioned, has played the most and is going to play the fewest in January, it might be very beneficial for us just to bring in one who has the option of giving, as I said, a knock-on effect elsewhere, even if that is a midfielder who lets someone push forward into attack, or, like you say, a defender which lets Gomez, for example, shuffle across and Trent becomes a midfielder, which also has that knock-on effect. So all of it can, because we have quite a versatile squad, make a knock-on effect in other areas of the pitch, and it might just make a bit of a nice difference.
Exactly, and say it's Inacio, and Gomez can now play more right back, and we've got Robertson to come back, so Gomez can focus on right back. So he knows this is where I'm playing. I'm just locking in on this role. And like you said, Trent can go into midfield. That then has the knock-on of Harvey can go into the front three, or like you said earlier, Szoboszlai can go into the front three. So it does have that domino effect, and it could be very beneficial to us. So I think we should be active. I think too often in the past, we've just been a little bit guilty of being satisfied with where we are. Like there's almost an element among certain swaths of the fan base of kind of celebrating being in the mix. And, finishing second is seen as some sort of success. And I think that does kind of live in the club as well. Like, there's just times where they're just happy to be in the mix. There is an opportunity this year, and I'd like to see us go for it. And look, even if you go and you buy an Ashio and you don't win the league, you've still got a really, really good player for the next 8 or 9 years. So it's not a short term, well, we signed him, so we have to win the league this year. It's a long term, this will help us win more trophies down the road type of move. And again, like with the holding midfield role, it's something that we have to get right. I think when we make our move, it's got to be the right piece. And I thought, obviously in the summer, we went for Caicedo, we went for Lavia. Neither of them worked out. Both of them, I would imagine, regret their decision. I think we should have gone for Doucouré. I think he would have been outstanding in this team, but his injury rules him out. The one we weren't linked with in the summer, what we talked about him a couple of times, was Kamara. And it was just that you didn't think Villa were going to give up on, well, we're going to let him leave after a year, not give up on him because he'd been great, but you didn't feel like they were going to let him leave after a year. But the rumour is that he's got a buyout clause in his contract at the end of this year if they don't get top 4. And while they're in a good position now, I kind of feel like when Spurs get everybody back, and if they add in January, I kind of feel like I'd back Spurs to be the team that rounds out the top 4 with ourselves, City and Arsenal. And if that's the case, then Kamara becomes an option for us, and I think he's perfect. I genuinely don't think we could find better than Boubacar Kamara. On the ball, he's exactly what we need in that role, and obviously defensively, he's outstanding. So I'd be happy to wait for someone like him. I really want us to get a 6 in. But if we went and bought Paulinho, and then let's say Arsenal in the summer went and got Kamara, I would be looking at that and thinking we've made a mistake here. Because Odegaard, Kamara, Rice, that's a hell of a midfield. And as good as Szoboszlai, Paulinho, and Alexis would be, I think you'd still be leaning towards them in that midfield battle. Let's look around the league quickly before we jump on to Toon. Who else needs to do what in this window, Karl? Like, forgetting, this team could do with player X or, an addition here. Who needs to do something in terms of they've got to buy a player for this role or they've got to look at changing the manager?
Crystal Palace. I think there's just a woeful amount of drift, irrelevance, and just tiresomeness about them at this point. I think it's one win in 12, 13, something like that, since the end of September. It just all feels very, very pointless because there's no real danger of them going down, let's be perfectly honest, unless Luton continue to what has been a really, really good improvement with 3 wins over the last 6. Can they do that again and again, though, and sort of double the tally that they've already got in points at the minute? Maybe they can, but I still think Palace probably have enough individual quality to not really be worried about it across the course of the year. So why not use half a season as a springboard, a platform for a manager who can actually take them forward, actually create something of note, and then, next year, a full year, a summer, maybe you have to sell one of the good ones, the Elise or Eze or whatever, but if not, then you've already put plans in place and shown them why they should stay, what you're giving them for the future. At the minute, they've not got any future there. It's just this season and the next season and the next season, and it's very, very frustrating to watch. I imagine it must be very frustrating for all those spoiled Crystal Palace fans, lest we forget. I think that would be the team in the bottom half who I think must do something, and that's probably all I would say.
Do you think...
Barring the teams in the relegation zone, obviously, but that's a different matter.
It is. I mean, look, everybody, I think, would agree that if Burnley were to change manager, Vincent Kompany couldn't have too many complaints. You know, he did a great job getting them up. I think they play attractive football, but the bottom line is they've got 11 points, and they're now 4 behind Luton, who have a game in hand. So nobody will be surprised if they made a change. The team below them have already made their change. Obviously, we've seen Forest make their change as well. But I think you're right. I think Palace are the logical ones. Do you think Graham Potter would take that job? Because if it was me, and if I was Steve Parish, I would be going to Potter and saying, you're the guy we want. You bring your brand of football here. We've got good goalkeepers, not top class, but good, in Dean Henderson and Sam Johnston. We've got a good young left back in Tyreek Mitchell. We've got one of the best centre-back pairings in the league in Guehi and Anderson. He's injured for now, but he'll be back next season, and Czech Doucouré is one of the best holding midfielders in the league. You've got Eze and Elise, her two elite playmakers. You've got Matthias Franke, who I don't know why Roy won't play him, but that kid looks really special. You've got Ahamada, another really good young midfielder that, again, Roy won't give a look into. And you've got Edouard and Matete, who aren't great up front, but they're both decent players. And I think Edouard is a good player. But you come in now, we'll back you in January. Eze's signed a new deal. Elise is a year into a new deal. We promise to keep them. We'll give you 18 months with those players. Come in now, we'll back you in this window, we'll back you in the summer. And let's try and get ourselves into the top half. Let's try and have a bash at getting into Europe, because why can't we? Why not us? Why can Brighton do it and we can't? Why can't we have a go at getting into Europe? Because we've got the foundational pieces. We've got plenty of talent here. We're a right back, a 9, and maybe 1 in midfield, or a winger away from having a really, really good starting 11. And why can't we have some ambition to go with the talent that we have? Do you think would Graham Potter take that job? Hello, I'm here to annoy you. I'm here to annoy you into listening to more of me and more of others on EPL Index. We don't just have the Anfield Index stuff. We've got EPL Index as well, which covers the entirety of the Premier League. And we have 3 podcasts and a whole bunch of really good writing on EPLindex.com. The podcasts are my own Two-Footed podcast, which is every day at 4 p.m, Monday through Friday, covering the whole league. We have A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. You know Tadiwa, he does Anfield Index. He presents A Tad Predictable before every Premier League match week. And then Kevin De Vries and his crew on the EPL Roundtable, they're every week after the Premier League match week. So make sure you listen to everything we're doing on EPL Index and follow us there on Twitter at EPL Index. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I do. I think that's there's a little bit of the, Brighton Crystal Palace thing. But I don't think that that's prohibitive. Not to him, not to.
And he left Brighton under a cloud as well, so I don't think he's got too many close feelings for the club.
No,
like he negotiated with Chelsea behind their back, so I don't think he's overly loyal to Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club. And the thing that really excites me about Palace is, I don't know if you've seen the documentary series on the sheer number of players coming out of South London. Palace are the only top flight club in South London. And they really could be tapping into that an awful lot better than they are. And maybe with a manager like Potter, who does focus on youth and does focus on development, maybe he could push them to be more aggressive and ambitious in their youth recruitment as well. and stop the flood of elite level South London based talent that ends up at Chelsea or West Ham or United or wherever, and keeps them in closer to home. And Palace could maybe be a real hub for those players, because it's a community club. And if those players who grow up 10 miles from the club could play for their local team, I do think you could see Palace potentially have a bit of a resurgence here. And, the next Eze, the next Elise, the next Sancho, maybe they appear through Palace's academy rather than somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's... We said this before when they got rid of Hudson last time, in fact, that they had such an opportunity to put in plan a project, a real proving ground, not just for local players, but even the best of the Championship, sign one of them a year, give them that opportunity, which they did start to do, to be fair. That should be a club which allows them to thrive and then sell on to a bigger place, and Palace themselves grow and so on. And look, Potter's one example. Guys, just put another one in there. Steve Cooper has been linked with the job as well. I think he's another excellent example of someone who would do exactly that. Really, really strong track record of developing young players, giving them opportunities and improving a team, basically.
Yeah.
None of this happens at the minute. None of it. It is the same team almost every week, barring injuries, the same style of play, and no map of where they're going. Nothing.
No, because all Roy cares about is finishing in the kind of, 13 to 15 range and not having a relegation scrap with 3 or 4 games left in the year. And he sees that as success. He doesn't have any ambition. And Guy's dropped another name in there, and I'll get to that in a sec. But Steve Cooper is an interesting one. I really like Steve Cooper. I just wonder if... I never like it when a manager gets sacked and then jumps into another job really quickly. I never feel like that works out. And if it goes badly and all of a sudden he's got 2 firings on his CV in an 18-month period, that can really harm the career of a very good young manager. I'd kind of like Cooper to maybe wait. And I think come March, April, there's probably another club who decide to make a change. Somewhere up and down the league, someone else might decide to make a change, and maybe then he's ready. Or maybe in the summer he just takes a different job. If I was him, I'd wait. Guys mentioned Kieran McKenna. Now, I don't think there's any chance of getting Kieran McKenna right now because Ipswich are doing incredibly well. And I think he would like to get them to the Premier League and test himself there with Ipswich, the club that gave him his opportunity as a manager. And if he could take them from League One to the Premier League in 2 years with very little budget, I think that would be an amazing achievement. I think Kieran McKenna is such a good manager. And it really does make me laugh that Ollie had Kieran McKenna and Michael Carrick, both of whom play wonderful football, on his staff and still served up dreck. But yeah, I think we'll agree Crystal Palace is a team that need to make a change in terms of the manager. And now is the time to do it. You've got this break coming up in the Premier League after the next round of games. This is the time to make the change. Say goodbye to Roy, thank him for everything, give him a gold watch and send him home. And go and get yourself someone like Graham Potter. We should move on
to the point. Maybe more to the point. If it doesn't work out with Potter, don't go back.
Yeah, no, don't ever hire Roy Hodgson again. If I was Parish, I might be looking at a change of director of football as well. Because I think Dougie Friedman's done some really good moves. I think he's done some bad moves as well. And I think if you look at the kind of the mess that their last managerial search was, when they ended up with Vieira, who was about their 5th choice, I don't think that was very good. It was Spurs in that same summer, you'll remember, had the hilarious situation where it took them 4 months to find a manager for Spurs. And that got all the attention, but Palace's was just as bad. They knew Roy was leaving from the April as well. And it still took them ages, and they ended up with Vieira, who did well, but he wasn't anyone's first choice. They looked at Dyche, they looked at Cooper, they looked at Nuno, they looked at Lucien Favre, and then they ended up with Vieira. And that's a very broad range of managers who do different things. So there didn't seem to be any kind of targeted approach there. So I think I'd be looking at maybe changing him as well. Another club that a lot of people are saying might be looking at changing manager in the next couple of months if things don't turn around are Newcastle United, Karl. 4 defeats in their last 5 Premier League games. Walloped by Everton, walloped by Spurs, lost at Luton, and then lost at home to Nottingham Forest. That's a really poor run. Now, they did beat 10-man Fulham in between that, but the 10-man thing is key because the Jimenez red card was a massive part of why Newcastle won that game. He sent off on 22 minutes. The game's 0-0. It takes them until 57 to break the deadlock with Lewis Miley. Then Almiron scores and then Dan Burn wraps it up. But that's their only win. Their only points in the last 5. They've also been dumped out of the Champions League and faced the ignominy of being out of Europe entirely. Let's start with Eddie Howe. He's done a really good job there. Obviously, the first 18 months were brilliant. Lifted them from the bottom of the table, took them into the Champions League in 18 months. But this season, it feels like they've lost some of their identity. Is that just that teams are expecting what they're going to get from Newcastle a bit more? I know they've had some injuries and that's been a factor too. But is it just that Eddie Howe doesn't seem to have a plan B and his tactics have kind of been found out a little bit?
I don't think it's a case of being found out. I do think that they've lacked guile. I think something we spoke about a little while ago, I think it might have been before their Champions League game against PSG, or maybe it was one of the following ones. They basically have played the same way, home and away, and domestically in Europe. And the European game is very, very different. And we spoke about that, and that they would have to find that out. You can't just play the same way and expect to win unless you are basically one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the world, which they're not. So I do think that cost them in Europe, even like take the Milan game, the last game week of the Champions League. Yes, they were trying to win to get, second place and all that. But first and foremost, don't lose from the position that they were in and stay in Europe and continue your European campaign. But they really, really shot themselves in the foot with that. And as you say, bottom of the group, no football at all in Europe. The other thing is that they've played away from home in a similar style that they try to at home, but where they have constant noise and support and everything from a really, really big, boisterous crowd on home on home soil. Away from home, obviously, they don't. And I think the results this season away from home have been really, really poor, mostly over the last sort of 6 weeks. But even before that, they weren't getting decent results. And I think that a lot of that is because they haven't yet come to terms with playing a slightly different way, whether that's being more pragmatic, whether it's trying to be rock solid and just take the draw or get a win if you can nick it, or whatever way around they want to do it. I think they've tried to do things very, very much the same, regardless of opponent, competition, or location of the match. And you can't. Again, unless you are one of the 2, 3 very, very best teams, that's a really, really difficult thing to do. The only thing I would say for their recent results that I would blame Howe for, because obviously this is due to injuries, right? There's horrific injury list there at the minute. But the only part of that I think he takes blame for is no rotation and playing the same players, because he has obviously got a very, very weakened bench, and a lot of the time it's like young players who are making up the numbers and all the rest of it. But you know what? To that I would say tough.
Yeah.
Basically throw a game if you fucking need to. Learn. You've just lost I think it's 5 out of the last 7 away games or 6 away games or something like that. At one point, especially over Christmas, you've got to understand you're away to Luton. Fine, it'll be seen as a terrible result, but make sure you're in a position 3 days later to beat Nottingham Forest at home.
Yeah.
And he didn't, and he still played the same lineup. You got people in there like Guimaraes and Longstaff who have basically played every minute in midfield of a very demanding midfield system, especially off the ball. And then Lewis Miley, who's been unbelievable, by the way, but is a teenager who hadn't featured for you 5 months ago and is suddenly being asked to play 90 minutes or near enough to 90 minutes, game after game after game after game after game, every 3-4 days. So at some point, you should have lined up with like Kraft and Ritchie as your centre-backs, Dummett as your full-backs, Dummett as one of your centre-backs, Murphy and another youngster, and maybe Hall across the midfield. Fine, it's not going to be a good performance. It's probably not going to be a good result, but your starters would be fresher. You wouldn't be relying on them playing and being knackered and feeling bad and losing every 3 days. They would have been much, much better frame of mind for one of those games. If he's done that a month ago, again, maybe they lose one of the ones where they rotate heavily. Let's say, maybe not Everton because that was straight after the match, but let's say they did it against Tottenham. Right, they got hammered by Tottenham 4-1 in the end. That was a really damaging result for confidence, for top four, for the performance level. The way Spurs just rode through them in the first half, and that came right before that critical match against AC Milan. So yeah, it's a big game domestically, but for the season, the Milan game was more important, and you'd already just failed to win, I think, 5 of the previous 6 or something like that. Again, going into that match, so maybe that one. You take one for the team. And again, against Luton, take one for the team. You've got a game 3 days later. Your players have played 7 in a row without any changes really to the lineup. I think that's where he's really gone wrong. But again, I would say that that's part of what you learn being in a team in Europe for the first time. I don't think that that's something he can, that maybe he would have been able to know. Being told so, yes, that's one way of knowing, but until you experience it, maybe that's not the same way. Like if he played this last 2 months again, I bet you he'd do different things in terms of his lineups, and not just because of the results, but because of the spiraling, the snowballing effect that each defeat has had,
and the added injuries that it's causing because players are breaking down. And you look at them last season. And what was so noticeable about them was how good they were defensively. The joint best defensive record in the league, 33 goals conceded. And as a result of that, they were really hard to beat. They only lost 5 times last season. And 2 of them were to us, who we just have some sort of hold over them. They only lost 5 times last year. The only team who lost as few was City. Then you look at this season, they've already lost 8 times. And they've conceded 25 goals already. So they're on target to concede 50, which is 17 more, which is an enormous amount more than last year. It's over 50% of what they conceded last year. So that's a huge, huge issue, is that defensively they've not been good. Now, big factor in that, they haven't had Botman for most of the year. And last year, for me, he was the best centre-back in the Premier League. I thought he was absolutely outstanding. Fabian Schär was very good. Kieran Trippier played very well. And Dan Burn played very well. But they played all season long. This season, no Botman, but the other 3 have been there. Burn missed some time with injury, but he's been there. But they've been played too much. I mean, you've seen it in Kieran Trippier in recent weeks. Horrendous mistakes against Everton. Big mistakes against Spurs. Big mistake recently against Luton. Kieran Trippier has just played far too much football. Like those lads you were talking about in midfield, he also plays a very demanding role because he's asked to provide the width down that right-hand side. And he is now, 33 years of age, pushing 34? So at some point, there's just going to be a limit on how often he can play when you ask him to do as much. So I would ask the question as to why Kieran Trippier has played as much football as he has this season. 26 starts in all competitions, 18 in the league of 19 games. The only one he missed was through suspension. Wasn't through injury, it was through suspension. He wasn't rested. You spent enormous money to bring Tino Livramento to the club in the summer. 32 million plus 8 in add-ons. So why hasn't he played a little bit more in the right back position that is his position? Most of his opportunities have come at left back. But you bought Lewis Hall to play left back, and he's had one start in the Premier League this season, 9 appearances. Now, is that a little bit of buyer's remorse? Is that maybe there's a clause in the obligation to buy that if he doesn't hit a certain number of games played, you don't have to buy him? I don't know. But what I do know is that Tino Livramento and Lewis Hall are 2 of the best young fullbacks in England. And we're yet to see them play nearly enough, while Kieran Trippier has fallen off a cliff and is still in the team week on week. Dan Burn has been dealing with a quite serious back injury. And when a man is 6'7", that's a big old back he has. And he's in the team every single week. Like, there's another odd situation with Jamal Lascelles, who very clearly not a first choice player. Last season, he played 7 games total in the Premier League. And I would guess half of them were off the bench. And yet he's in the team now playing instead of Botman. And he's your captain. But why is he your captain? If he wasn't first choice last year and didn't come into this season as first choice, why is he still the automatic captain when he plays? See, that kind of stuff bothers me. Because now you're adding a different voice in the dressing room, on the pitch, when the players have gotten used to hearing Trippier taking orders from Trippier, taking their lead from Trippier. Now, he can still do that, but now Lascelles is feeling like he can be the one to start dictating, to start rah-rah-rahing. And I just think that throws things off. So, going into this game, the tune, like you said, a number of absentees. Tonali suspended, Hope injured, Murphy injured, Barnes injured, Lascelles injured, Willock injured, Anderson injured, Manquillo and Target both injured as well. Now, realistically, of that group, Tonali, Pope and Barnes are probably the only ones that are in their first choice 11. But it is taking away some of their depth. But they should still have a pretty strong team to put out against us. But like we've said, there's a lot of tired players in that group. So I'm looking at Dubravka in goal, Trippier, Schär, Botman, Byrne as a back 4. And then midfield, Guimaraes will obviously be in there. Longstaff will obviously be in there. And I assume Joelinton will be the third one. And then in attack, Isak, Almiron and Gordon either side. Do you think, are you expecting any difference from that?
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac and Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, Mac boxes and games consoles. Visit LibertyShield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
I mean, the one thing that they have got coming into this game is that a couple of their players who have been out injured are now back, like literally for this match or just as appearance as a substitute in the previous match against Forest. So they do have a few more options than they have had over the last sort of 5 weeks or so, let's say. Joelinton, obviously, a shorter term injury. Isak was out for a bit. Wilson's now back. It's a little bit easier for them. Obviously, Botman that you mentioned just came back like 2 games ago, I think was his first one back. So it is a little easier for them. I would think that probably we see Joelinton and Callum Wilson come into the starting lineups. But whether that is for Isak for Wilson, for example, straight swap, or they go with both of them and play one from the flank, which is very, very obviously a possibility, so that they can rest someone like Almiron. I think he kind of has to at this point. There's been a really, really rough run of results. Forget circumstance now. At some point, just the fact that you keep losing these games matters. And over that last run, they've lost to Luton, lost to Forest, the one to Tottenham we mentioned, and they lost to Everton as well. They lost to Bournemouth before that in the Premier League as well. So you kind of have got to at some point say, enough's enough. We just play the minutes rather than the people at this point. Because again, their next 2 after us, Sunderland in the FA Cup, you can't go into a game like that. Even if the fans have been understanding over the last few weeks, you can't go into a game of Sunderland v Newcastle, playing knackered players, produce a rubbish performance and go out. They won't let that happen. Like, the fans will not be accepting of any kind of excuses for that. And then after Sunderland is Man City. Yeah. So they have to be balancing it a little bit more at some point. And it is, 4 or 5 days? I think 5 days, isn't it, between the Forest and the Liverpool matches for them. So it should be enough training and readiness time to make those changes, even for the players who have just come back from injury. I would expect Miley to not start against us. I know he's been really good, but he's one of the ones you need to protect, as much from the situation as the situation.
It's a game under the lights at Anfield. It's a very, very hostile place at times. The other thing for them as well, with that FA Cup game against Sunderland that you mentioned, the FA Cup is now their only chance at silverware. And I kind of feel like Eddie Howe might need some silverware to still have a job for next season, because they're not going to be in the Champions League next year.
No, I mean, not even just silverware, right? You're looking at Europe at this point, and they're 9th in the table. They are 4 points off West Ham, who are in far, far better form, and they're 6th. So,
and they just got dumped out of the League Cup as well by Chelsea with another Trippier mistake and then the penalty miss, because he's been overplayed. You look at them last season and you look at games played, Pope third in the league, 37, Trippier 38, Botman 36, Byrne 38, Schär 36. So that defence was basically there all season together. Midfield, Joelinton 32, Longstaff 33, Gamerish 32. So again, they had their midfield, Joe Willock 35. So they had their midfield all season long. They did have some injuries in attack. Obviously, Almiron played 34 games, but then Wilson played 31, but 10 of them were off the bench, and Isak only played 22. So they did have some injury issues in attack last season, but their team was built on their defence, and those players were there most weeks. And this season, with the injuries, because of the overplaying and the demands, it's a little bit we talked with this last season, how they were almost a little bit like Liverpool light last season, where they had a midfield that was there and primarily grafting, overrunning teams, trying to overpower teams in the midfield. Obviously, they had the elite quality of Gamerish, but we'd had the elite quality of Fabinho. But the other two were in there as workhorses, whether it was Joelinton, Longstaff, Willock, whoever, doing the Henderson, Wijnaldum type of roles. And the back four was rock solid, like Liverpool's had been when we were winning the title and challenging for the title. Not as good individually, but a very, very good unit. And this season, that hasn't been there for them. And, they're, like you said, 9th in the league, 4 behind West Ham, and in really poor form, going in the wrong direction. 4 defeats from 5 in the league, plus that defeat, I suppose it counts officially as a draw against Chelsea, but they lost on penalties and went out. And obviously the defeat to to Milan as well. Like that's just really poor. And like even the way they went out of the Champions League, where they took 4 points from their first 2 games away to Milan, home to PSG, and then they take 1 point from the next 4 games, like that, this has been building with them. This is not just the last couple of weeks type of thing. They've been hit and miss all season, really. You look back at the start of the year when they lost 3 in a row. Now losing to to City, not an issue. But the manner of the defeat to us, that's very, very poor. And then Brighton wiped the floor with them. Then they bounced back and they won 3 in a row. They drew 1, they won 1, they drew 1. They beat Arsenal. That you beat Arsenal and you go to Bournemouth and lose. And Bournemouth hadn't started their run at that point. That was kind of what kick-started Bournemouth's run. Then you beat Chelsea, you beat United. Then you lose to Everton, you get walloped by Spurs. You beat Fulham. But the last 2, I mean, losing to Luton and Forest in back-to-back games. And like you said, if they just rested their players in one of them and gone full bore for the Forest game, they probably win that game. But instead they play the same exhausted players in both and they end up losing both. And rather than having 3 points from those 2 games, which pre-season they'd probably marked as 6, they end up with no points and 2 really poor performances. So they come to Anfield now, low on confidence, in their lowest league position since when they were certainly never that low last year. The lowest they hit, well, I tell a lie, 7 games in, they were 10th after 5 draws out of 6 games. But the previous season, then obviously under Howe, they'd turned things around and they'd ended up finishing 11th. But this is halfway into this season, and they're sitting in 9th, so they're almost back where they were 18 months ago. And they don't really seem to have an answer right now. Like it's the same style, like you said, in every single game, and the players right now just aren't up to it. They just don't have the physical capacity to do what's being demanded of them. And I still expect a tough game from them. And obviously they do have a lot of very good players. Botman is outstanding. Gimerich is incredible. Isak is a tremendous player. There's a lot of other talented players there as well. But I do feel like we should be confident going into this one, Karl. We do have a bit of a hold over them. They're still crying about Fabio Carvalho's goal last season. They're still crying about Darwin this season. I feel like we should win this game.
We absolutely should. We're at home for starters, and we have been very nearly excellent there, or very nearly perfect. I think we have been still excellent. It's important, I think, for Liverpool that we win, given that we didn't the last 2, and definitely one of them, as you mentioned earlier, was a case of very, very dropped points. So I don't think we can have any kind of conversation about Liverpool going on and winning the title and stuff if you draw 3 in a row at home. Even though the names sound all right, Man United, Arsenal, Newcastle, we know that at least 2 of those matches are not what they were or what they could have been just by context of where the other teams are. So we do have to win this. But by the same token, we should, and I think that we will. I think the first goal will be quite important because if Liverpool get it, and especially if we do, as early as we did against Burnley, for example, with basically our first real shot, heads will drop just because of the context where they are. On the other hand, if they happen to score first with one of their attacks, or if they happen to score first after we've had 25 minutes of dominance of possession, they suddenly have something to really fight for. And although, yeah, they'll be knackered, you have to obviously understand the boost that players get for 10, 15 minutes at a time when they are protecting the lead, when they are unexpectedly beating Liverpool, when they are winning in the face of adversity. This is all the points of football and Premier League and sport in general that makes upsets happen. So it's really, really key for us that we control matters. And I do think that the first goal will be a very, very important thing for the course of the game. I think Liverpool are capable of winning from behind. We've seen that before. And like you said, there's this mental thing that we appear to have over them at the minute, especially later on in matches. Whether we bring back Fabio Carvalho to boost our options for this specific game is up to each listener's imagination. But either way, we should have enough. And even if we do have to make a couple of changes or compromises in the starting 11, I think we still have to back us to win.
Bring Carvalho back and just don't even put him in the squad. Just parade him around before the game.
Yeah.
While
do you remember the cup game against Everton where we brought back Nat Phillips on loan from his loan in Germany? He played that one game. I think he might have even got man of the match and then sent him straight back again. Maybe just the threat. Just release a little bit of media reports around that. Don't even do it just before the game.
Just while they're having their warm-up, just have them go and walk behind them, wave to the crowd. So we have no Matip. He's done, obviously, for the season and might never play for the club again. No Basetic. God knows when he's going to be back. It could be any time. No Robertson. Klopp kind of hinted that it'll be February before he's back, which is a bit of a blow. Thiago... They're hopeful he'll be back in team training in the next couple of weeks, which could be a big, big boost. Alexis, Klopp said he could be back in training today. I haven't seen any pictures yet, so I don't know. And obviously Costas will be out for a while with the broken collarbone. We did some rotating against Burnley. I assume we'll go as strong as we can in this one. If you look at our fixtures, obviously... This is our last league game for 3 weeks, so we can go fairly strong. We do, in the interim, have a League Cup semi-final to take care of, but we also have an FA Cup game that I would personally be throwing away. I think we've got 3 competitions that we should focus on. The EFL Cup is ours to win. The Europa League, I feel like, is ours to win. They should be priority, and obviously the Premier League. The FA Cup, I'd be very happy to see us throw out a very mixed team with no real intention of winning the game. So I feel like we can go really strong here. So, and it is 10 days from this game to that Fulham game. So Alisson, Trent, Ibu, Virgil, Gomez, I assume that's the back four. The only real question would be Kwanzaa, but I think it'll be Ibu.
Yep.
Midfield, Dom, Endo in his last game before he goes, and Curtis. I think even if Alexis is fit, he comes off the bench. And then Salah, Darwin, and then left wing is a question mark. Diaz has not been in good form. Gakpo has not been in good form, but I did think the first half against Burnley, I thought he looked better.
Played better from the left, didn't he?
And then Diogo Jota, who obviously came back against Burnley, but I don't think I'd be rushing him back into the starting 11. So I think it's Cody. But that feels harsh on Harvey Elliott, Karl, who I thought played well against Burnley. It feels harsh to leave him out. So is there a Harvey right side of the midfield, Dominic left side of the front three possibility here?
I wouldn't, and I'll tell you why, because this is also Mo's last game before he goes. And 2 cup games coming up, I would just make Harvey Elliott the starter right wing for both of them, Arsenal and Fulham, and see where we go from there, see where Elliott is from there, see what we perform in terms of whether he dovetails with Szoboszlai, whoever it is in each game. Elliott can still have an impact in this match off the bench for us wherever we need him to. But I think you just, like you said, go full strength in this one. Harvey knows he's got a chance coming up after that with 2 successive games in quick succession. And let's just get this game as a win and don't worry too much about everything else. I actually think we'll go quite strong against Arsenal as well, because there will already be rotation forced upon us by the 2 who are not going to be here. And potentially someone might come back from injury, let's say. Might be the case, might not be from the start. But, we've got 6 days between Burnley and Newcastle. We've got 6 days between Newcastle and Arsenal. So, Fulham is the priority, but Fulham's also at home. And there's no games after that for us for 11 days. So I do think that we'll kind of go very strong against all 3 of them, to be honest.
It would be nice to knock Arsenal out of the FA Cup, even if we were out in the fourth round. It'd just be nice.
That's the thing, though. If you knock Arsenal out at this point, there might be, let's say, half a dozen teams on their day, cup match, can trouble us, whatever. It might be an away draw. If we do manage to knock Arsenal out, you might not get another Premier League team until the quarterfinals.
Yeah. And you're really only looking at City that you'd be worried about, or Villa away.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's half a dozen who, on their day, if you get Newcastle in the quarterfinals 3 months down the line, it's at St James's and they've got all their players back. Obviously, that's a difficult game. Play West Ham away or whatever. But you don't know, and you haven't got to worry about it at this point. So I am in favour, actually, of going pretty strong in all three matches, just by the context of rest days around.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. And, we do play Arsenal, obviously, in the league early in February. So if we could beat them in the FA Cup, it might just give us a bit of a psychological advantage over them before we go there in the league. Yeah, fair. So Gakpo left wing then is what we're settling on? Over Diaz?
I would.
And Jota off the bench?
Yeah, I would from the start go with Gakpo. He played pretty well. Obviously got the goal a couple of games ago. Just see if we can keep the confidence going at least. He's going to be needed to be playing better and scoring goals. So let's see if we can do that.
Yeah, and I think having Jones behind him in midfield will help as well, because it's just another nothing performance from Gravenberch, and it didn't really give Gakpo the support he needed. So, I think that's fair. Right, prediction time. I'm going to go for a 1-0 Liverpool win.
Oh, it's remarkably low-key of you to start the new year.
Very, very reserved. Very reserved. 1-0 back top of the league.
May I ask why?
I kind of feel like, given how they've been in the last while, they're going to come with a big focus on let's keep it really tight at the back. And it's one of those games where I think they'll try and frustrate us. I think we might end up getting a goal from like a long-range shot or something like that, because that's where I think Dubravka will let them down. But I just think they're going to try and spoil the game. I think we'll see a lot of the dark art stuff that we saw last season when they were, kind of not everybody's favourite underdog, but you know what I mean? Like they were seen as this, look at Eddie Howe, what a job he's done. Like they were bottom, now they're in the mix for top four. This is great. Look how impressive this is. And the ball will be in play for about 12 of the 90 minutes. Kind of feel like they might come and do that.
I wouldn't be surprised if they try and do that. I'm going to back Liverpool to be far more explosive and quick-paced about their play, though, and create a lot of chances. I'm going to say that we create enough chances and play well enough for a 4 or 5-0 game. Maybe 4 or 5-1. I haven't factored
in the Kieran Trippier goal that he's going to give us. So I'm going to say 2-0. I'll go 2-0.
Okay, fine. So I think we'll create enough chances and play well enough for that kind of scoreline, but I don't think we'll score that many, because I just don't think that our forwards are at that level at the minute. But I do think we'll make a couple of them count. So I'll go for 3. I'll go for 3-0.
Cool. Right, there we go. That is us for today, folks. We will be back next week to preview Arsenal and to do a bit more on the January transfer window. And then we have that break where we've got a couple that are outstanding that we haven't done, a couple of questions and fixing things and other stuff that were sent in to us that we will have to revisit. So that's kind of the plan moving forward. We might just put one together as well where we take each of the positions that we each feel Liverpool need to address, and maybe put forward some suggestions, some that haven't been talked about today and haven't necessarily been linked in the media. Is there anything you want to plug before you go?
No. Just I think usual of, if people want us to answer any questions in the upcoming break that we've got, or do any kind of features, then by all means leave us a message in Discord, and we'll try and get that done when Liverpool are not playing for 2 weeks.
There you go. Right. Take care of yourselves, folks. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.
Sports Social Podcast Network.